Hello and good morning. My name is Hong Kit. Together with me is Loon, my host partner. We are really glad that you have come to join us this Sunday morning for our Day 22 L2 construction series. Today's topic is resolving disputes through mediation during COVID-19, where we will be focusing on mediation and also the role played by the lawyers. On this session, you will meet four special guests who are all reputable and experienced lawyers. They are Kelvin Prakash, a partner of Mohandas Partnership, Samrith Kaur, a partner of Samrith, Sanjeev and Partners, James Monteiro, a partner of a legal firm called James Monteiro, and Buddy Law, who had been a practicing lawyer in Malaysia before he went to Australia. And he was admitted as a lawyer of Supreme Court of Victoria in Australia in 2010. And since then, he has been practicing law in Australia, another fine Malaysian export. Our flow today is first to have Kelvin and Samrit to give us a presentation, and then James and Buddy will join us during the Q&A session. Without further ado, let's get started with our first presenter, Kelvin. Kelvin, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Kelvin, can you please introduce yourself to the audience, and after that, please proceed with your presentation.
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Kevin, and as Honky mentioned, I practice at Messrs. Mohandas Partnership here in KL. I'm principally involved in disputes, allow me to present what I think might be the problem that most litigation lawyers or disputes lawyers will be faced with, not just for the next 2 or 3 months, but possibly even until the end of next year. And why I think there will be a serious change in the way we practice from now on, at least for some time. If I may just ask, Honkit, if you can put up my slide, the next, yes, different environment. Now, the COVID-19 has presented us with really an unprecedented disruption to both our daily life and business activity on a global scale. There's been so much of emphasis in the last 6 to 8 weeks on lockdown-related disputes, force majeure, extensions of time in construction projects, or perhaps even other kinds of work, suspension, rights to suspend, what do I do? I can't get to work. But I think this is only just the beginning. It's not just about dealing with lockdown-related problems that have arisen. Our real problem, at least for us disputes lawyers, is going to start in the next 2 or 3 months onwards. It's not just about what has happened during the lockdown, which will present its own set of problems. But I think a lot of the problems will arise because of a change in how we interact with ourselves once the lockdown has been lifted. I for one, and I think I can say this quite safely, I'm not going to want to book the middle seat in an aircraft. If I go into a restaurant, I'm going to look for the table that is probably furthest from the next table. That is going to force a lot of businesses to pare down their operations. The nub of the problem, I think, for the next 18 months to 24 months is going to be cash flow. This is going to present a fertile environment for a lot of dispute. I think a lot of disputes, sorry, if I could move to the next slide. I think a lot of disputes are going to will relate to employee-related disputes and contractual disputes. Employee-related disputes have already begun. In our environment, at least in the Malaysian environment, there is a conciliation procedure built into the entire procedure already. So I think that can take care of itself. But contractual disputes have begun, and they are going to move to, I hope not, but possibly into an unmanageable level. Construction-related disputes are going to grow. There is so much of talk, romance even, about EOT and force majeure. But I think a lot of the problems are going to be cash flow related after this. The entire build and sell data, or sell and build, it's going to become moot because there are going to be very serious problems with cash flow. the ability to complete the contract is ability to complete the project is going to be huge. Materials are going to end up becoming scarce, and a lot of that will have to do, I think, because of a broken or a very severely dented supply chain. Disputes are going to arise all throughout the supply chain, from the manufacturer to the material provider to the transporter, you name it. There are going to be problems there, and it's going to be so many disputes. Materials are not going to be delivered. Order cancellations are growing. We're reading almost every day where large retailers are canceling entire orders for simple things from our t-shirts to even the cotton that you make t-shirts from or with, sorry. The other area is family-related disputes, which I hope someone can correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of the motivation for ADR or other court-mandated mediation in the UK started or began because of family-related disputes. The courts there thought, look, you're wasting too much time and money sorting out these sort of disputes, family disputes in court. Perhaps it should move to some form of other more cost-effective resolution means and methods. And of course, plain old-fashioned debt collection is going to, I think, explode. Not just bank debt, but all sorts of other debts. Goods sold and delivered disputes are going to come back like we had in the late 1990s into the early 2000s. We were happy that Bank Negara started this initiative, the moratorium for 6 months. And we were all very happy and euphoric given that the banks decided to play along and allow this moratorium for 6 months. But I don't think a lot of us have put much or any thought into what happens after the 6 months. We are all going to be cash strapped anyway when the 6 months is up. The problems will start then, October onwards. You still have to pay down your debt, your loans. By then, 6 months worth of interest would have accumulated. A lot of people who are going to end up losing jobs from the first step are not going to be able to pay down or pay off their debt. The other thing that I think, although might seem at first blush helpful, might present its own problems, and that is the recent attempt by the Minister of sorry, I forget which ministry, the minister to amend the time limit to respond to a statutory demand under Section 466 of the Companies Act from 21 days to 6 months. It possibly has presented us with or at least those who are suffering from cash flow problems, some time, a lifeline even, to pay down their debt or to meet the statutory demand. But what happens after that? If it starts now, the 6 months will expire sometime in October or November, which means a whole new wave of demands will start from then. Litigation, I think, or rather disputes, will explode. And sorry, if I could just move on to the next slide, okay. And because of this, what I think might end up being an explosion in litigation, there's going to be a change in the attitude towards litigation altogether, simply because of cash flow. There will be a cooling towards expensive litigation in favor of cost-effective dispute resolution. It is invariably it is going to happen. I think lawyers and all of those who have logged in here and who are listening today, and all lawyers out there, we've got about 19,000 lawyers in the Malaysian bar. And a lot of us are disputes lawyers, and we have to understand that the nature of our service is quite dependent on the misery of others. People come to us, they pay us to have a look at their problems, and more often than not to try to achieve a maximum benefit for our client. But I think a lot of the thinking, because of cash flow, is going to change from maximum benefit to possibly cutting loss, breaking even, or perhaps even walking away unscathed. That might end up being a good outcome. Lawyers, we are going to be faced with the twin problem, our biggest nightmare: collection and a severe competition in terms of fees. The race to the bottom may have already started. When I say race to the bottom, I mean in terms of fees, there will always be another lawyer who will be willing to do the same work for a lot less. And a lawyer B, C, and D trying to outbid or outfee the other lawyer. It is going to happen. Cultural attitudes will be trumped by the twin concern of access to justice and costs. Cultural attitudes in the sense that a lot of the time, and all of us lawyers face this, we start an action and there will not be real impetus or motivation to try to settle the matter until it's very close to trial or hearing. Because of, I think it's true, face saving. We don't want to give away our case. We don't want to give away what we might think might be our weaknesses. That, I think, or rather that motivation might come much sooner than later now. And I think it'll be on us now as litigation lawyers, disputes lawyers, to bring the possibility of resolving disputes very early on in the dispute. The moneyed class, those who actually have budgets for disputes, might reduce their budgets and think what we might think. Commercial contracts or commercial work, conveyancing, land property transactions are really a business cost. It's necessary. Clients want to pay for it because they want to move ahead, they want to make more money. Litigation or dispute is really a business nuisance. Nobody wants it. And everybody pays for it only because they feel they have to pay for it. No one thinks of trying to resolve it earlier on because everyone just wants to win. But now I think, and this is really the last tab of my third slide, which is all that I've said, is really the argument for what I want to say and what the argument is. And that is, I think mediation is not going to be a luxury anymore. It's going to become necessary. The client is going to want to look for the quickest and the most cost-effective way out of a dispute. Nobody wants to pay the lawyers anymore to think up fancy arguments and to take a dispute all the way to trial. Samrith and Buddy, of course, are going to explain to us what the experiences are. Now, that I think is the problem. What I think we all should do, and Hockey, if I can move to my last slide before I hand over to Samrith. I think these are the items that we really should be thinking of for now and very quickly. First, I think these are the three things that we need to think of very quickly. The first is awareness. A lot of the problem that we have in terms of presenting mediation to clients is awareness of this alternative means of resolving a dispute. We need to explain to clients very quickly. The roadshows even, I think, should be initiated to bring to the masses of mediation as a means of resolving a dispute very quickly. Court annexed mediation is there all the time. And from my personal experience, but then again, this is my personal experience, I would say 4 to 5 out of 10 times, my matters have been referred to mediation have been successful. I've not had the opportunity of having a matter mediated except for one, and that was a very long time ago. But at least in recent memory, a mediation outside of court annexed mediation, and at least 4 to 5 out of 10 times have been successful. So I think mediation works. The Malaysian Mediation Center is there, and we have a whole group of very well-trained mediators who are there, who can really help get a lot of what I think is going to come from the next 18 to 24 months through in terms of disputes that are obviously going to arise. AIC rules, AIC mediation rules are there for everyone to use. AIC have what is called a med-up procedure, where the mediation rules itself caters for the possibility of where a party who has gone through the AIC mediation and they have come to an agreement can have their agreement recorded as a consent award under the arbitration rules itself. And a lot of people do not know of these procedures, but which are there for us to use, which are there for lawyers. And I think it is incumbent on us as lawyers to take these options to our clients very quickly. And right now, in fact, we can. And I think we need to support the AIC in terms of their rules. Now, the next thing that I think we need to think of, and I think the courts should take a leading role, is whether to encourage or to make mediation compulsory within the litigation process itself. We have our practice direction number 4 of 2016, which suggests that the courts during the case management procedure may, but the word that is used in the PC practice direction is may encourage parties to resolve through mediation. Perhaps we should think of moving from mere encouragement to compulsory mediation. Buddy will explain to us shortly about a very interesting procedure in Australia and in Melbourne, in how they have fused mediation into the litigation or dispute procedure. Now, in the UK, it is not a prerequisite for court proceedings. Mediation is not prerequisite to court proceedings, but the courts there actively take a refusal to mediate, or at least a party's not very good attitude towards mediation into consideration when awarding costs. They use costs as a means to penalize a party who are not playing ball. Okay, when a party could have very easily have resolved a dispute quickly, but they have refused to do so. There's been a very interesting development recently in 2019, Lomax and Lomax. There, the Court of Appeal the court there ordered early neutral evaluation of a case. There was a challenge. One party said, look, why do I have to go to this? I don't want to do it. But the Court of Appeal there said, no, the courts can actually order early neutral evaluation where one or the other party does not consent to that cost. Perhaps our courts should think of compulsorily or directing or ordering mediation as part of our procedure. And the third thing that we should all mediators, and whether court annexed mediation procedure, Malaysian Mediation Center, I hope someone is on today apart from Samrith, and of course the AIEC, should consider using video. Access, I think, helps a party think of mediation almost immediately as a means of resolving the disputes. Now, this really is what I wanted to say today is I think we really have a problem. And it's going to come to a point where there's going to be so much dispute, but no one's going to want to pay. The lawyers, I think we need to take a role. We should be at the forefront right now, and we should be pushing mediation, not just as if it's some luxury that we have, and which is how we always treat mediation. It's not a luxury. I think this is the way to go in the next 18 to 24 months, because otherwise we're going to be inundated with cases that are non-paying for the lawyers, and it's not going to help the parties at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, for the insightful presentation. Now, as of this time, we have about 300 participants joining us on a Sunday, and thank you again very much for your support. We are also streamlining this session live on Facebook, and there will be several other participants who are actually watching or joining this webinar on our Facebook. Now, I'm going to pass the mic to Samrith, who will be talking a little bit more about the mediation process. Samrith, over to you.
Thanks, Walun. Thanks, Hongkit and Walun, for inviting me for this to do this presentation on mediation during this COVID-19 time. A little bit about myself. I am a practicing lawyer. I am qualified arbitrator, adjudicator, and certified mediator. So I wear a lot of hats, but my passion definitely lies in alternative dispute resolution. Mediation being my main what I would like to encourage people to do now. Can I have the next slide? I'll just go into my slides in time short. Okay, what I will briefly want to go through is why mediation should be the first option, how lawyers can encourage or assist their clients, making mediation attractive enough for them to want to mediate, and what are the techniques to be adopted to encourage parties, and what actually lawyers, or not just lawyers, anyone who wants to do mediation, what they should know about mediation before starting or commencing a mediation. And we will have Buddy who will be talking about the Australian mediation experience later to us. Next slide, please. Okay, the facts, what we are going through now, I think Kevin has gone through it very thoroughly. It is, there will be a lot of cases coming out during COVID-19 post-MCO period. A lot of breaches that's going to happen. People are not able to fulfill their contracts, and all these uncertainties, and we don't know what is the new norm, it's going to be. All these are all reasons for us now to shift our combative nature to a more solution finding method, which is the mediation. So don't forget, everybody is going to be on the cost cutting measures. So cost will be the main thing in their mind. So again, like I said, the mediation will and can play a positive role in both preventing and amicably resolving these disputes. And Kevin was also saying that there should be a platform for video mediation. There is already an online dispute resolution platform, so that is not a problem. All we have to do is learn how to use this technology. Next slide, please. So what actually is mediation? We have the Mediation Act. It is defined in Section 3 as a voluntary process. Voluntary process in which a mediator facilitates communication and negotiation between parties to assist the parties in reaching an amicable agreement, of their dispute. That means there's a third party involved in now facilitating, not just handing down a decision or listening or taking side. He's a neutral person, just listening to the parties, coming up with their own solution. He will help them generate solutions to come up with something that they can live with. So almost all the things that Kevin talked about earlier on, all those, the chain reaction from the employer, the contractor, the subcontractor, the supplier, all this can be mediated, with the exception of criminal violent matters, which are violent, or public policy matters. These are merely because the mediator does not have, he can't send down a sentence, for example. So he is just facilitating for you to come up with your own solution to your problem. So mediation does save time and money. You don't have to spend so much time looking into a case, finding the precedents and all that. You just go and mediate the problem. It offers clients the opportunity to reduce risk and resolve a problem. It's so beautiful, isn't it? It's successful mediation will always be a win-win solution, not like the other dispute resolution methods where there's always a winner and a loser. Here, when both parties comes together, they will actually try to get a win-win out of their problem that they're having, the dispute that they're having. So the disputants are in control and they reach their own voluntary solutions to the conflict. Next slide, please. So you utilize this neutral facilitator, the mediator, which also increases the chance of you reaching a negotiated agreement. For example, if you go to court, you present your matters. The judge is the one who actually hands down his decision. You can't negotiate with him, but in a mediation, you can negotiate with your parties. You can have a session, a private session with your mediator who will try to understand your problem and try to bring it out during the joint session, and then try to narrow the gap. If you have when you come in, you'll be pulls apart. But as you start negotiating, the gap becomes closer and closer, and then you will have a solution. Okay, so mediation can lead to avoidance of escalation of future disputes. So, if you go to court, you have a paper judgment sometimes. Party may not want to pay, party may not want to, follow the order that's come out. So it leads to a next stage. You will have to file something. If it's a judgment order, you may want to file the execution and all that. But in mediation, all these can be resolved. And because you are involved in coming out with a solution, you will want to carry that through. Another thing about mediation is confidential. We have our live streaming not long ago on our Court of Appeal matters. Some parties may not be comfortable with that. Do you want to know that you are being sued? Do you want to tell the whole world that you are suing somebody? Maybe you'll be people look at you a different way. So mediation is actually a very, a confidential process where your parties are just sitting there, and at the end of the mediation, the mediator actually destroys his notes. So, it is kept confidential throughout the thing. You do not discuss it. There is no precedent, if you can say, in a mediation. You can commence it anytime. You can commence a mediation even before going to court. You can commence mediation even when you have filed something in court, or even at the end of your hearing or your trial and all that. And the better part of it is that you can, even after getting a decision from the court, from the arbitrator, from the adjudicator, you can still mediate. There's nothing stopping you from mediating your final decision that has come out, because you may not be able to you may not be able to pay as the award or the decision has come out. If they said pay within 4 weeks or 6 weeks, certain huge amount, you may not be able to pay that. I have assisted in a mediation where party, after winning or losing, a mediation arbitration, went to mediate, and then they are resolving it by paying monthly. So that is one thing that you can still do at any point of time. Mediation can be done any point of time, right? So mediators, being neutral facilitators, can assist in avoiding conflicts by aligning parties' interests through contract revision. You go through as many revisions as you want that respond to the changing time, the changing conditions that we are in now. So if you have already, prior to this period, had an agreement, but you can't follow it through, you can now go for mediation and try to revise the terms of your contract. As long as it's acceptable to both parties, you can vary the agreement. No need to go fight in court, no need to spend so much money, no need to spend so much time. So these are the things that I would say that you will make mediation attractive. Next slide, please. So how can lawyers encourage their clients to mediate? How to make mediation attractive to people? First thing first, like Kevin said, you have to create awareness. You need to tell your client about this mediation. What is this mediation? Tell them the benefit. There's so many benefits, and there are some I have just put up. It's cheap, it's cost effective, it's convenient, it's easily accessible. You can sit anywhere and mediate. You can go to a coffee shop, get people to sit down and mediate. Although it may not be the best environment, but there's no courtroom drama there. It's quicker outcome than court proceeding. You can wrap up a mediation in half a day, 2 days, maximum few days if it's a long, difficult matter. So it is a realistic outcome is possibly reached because parties can directly discuss this dispute with each other. It is the parties that are coming with this solution. That's why it's realistic. They will know. And how do you know it's realistic? Because the mediator will do reality testing, which I will explain a little bit later. So since parties are in control of their outcome, it is very likely to be implemented, isn't it? I mean, if you both are coming up with a solution, definitely you will want to follow it through. And again, it's confidential. You don't have to worry about it. And a settlement before a mediator saves the parties' anxieties going to court. Some of our clients, you can see, they get so nervous going to court. Just sitting in a hearing already, they get nervous. Can you imagine putting them as a witness and all that? So all that can be done away with in mediation. So again, like I said that there is this online dispute resolution mechanism already in place. And tell your clients, it's always a win-win situation. It's never a win-lose situation because, again, I keep emphasizing, parties come up with their own solutions at the end of the day. Next slide, please. But other attractions are parties decides to the outcome on with their own resolution instead of a third party. So you don't depend on a third party, a judge, an arbitrator, adjudicator to come up with a decision that you can or cannot live with. You are in control of your own outcome. So the mediator does not determine which of his client is right. He just listens and he facilitates parties to come out with a solution. He is just a listener. He doesn't take part. He's an unbiased person who should be just listening to the parties and trying to help them resolve. So in a mediation, the conflict that is inherent in lawsuit is replaced by parties trying to seek common solution, which both can live with. And how both can live with, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, is reality testing. Now, the mediator, once you come up, for example, you said that every month I can pay him 50,000. The mediator will say, are you sure? How are you going to pay? What is your financial situation like? What if you can't pay? So when you put all these questions to the party who is, who are coming up with a solution, it makes them think, and they will want them to say, okay, maybe 50,000 may not be possible. Maybe, okay, 30,000 definitely I can. So that is reality testing. So once that is done, the outcome is a solid outcome. Both parties can live with all these things that you have come up with, all the solutions that you've come up with. Because maybe it's not just one issue that you're having. You have multiple issues. So all that, each time, each solution, each dispute gets settled, you put it down in writing. All these will be recorded in a settlement agreement. When you put it down in settlement agreement, of course, these are areas that lawyers will be involved. The way my presentation is going, it's for both parties going themselves to mediation and parties with their lawyers. So if they have lawyers present, lawyers will then take down all the solutions that they have come up with. They put it down, record it down in a settlement agreement. It's executed by the parties and witnessed by the mediator. Then it becomes a binding agreement. So mediation leading to a voluntary agreement will almost always guarantee compliance with whatever has been worked out with. Next slide, please. So what are the techniques that we need to encourage parties? The lawyers themselves need to now shift their mind from right base. My client is right, whatever it is. We always tell the client, no problem, we can get this for you, kind of thing. To interest-based, what are the interests involved? What are the parties' interests at the end of the day? They want to settle, they want a solution to their problem. They may not, stop badgering our clients and saying that you are right, he is wrong. Let's now calm ourselves down during this time and help our clients to look and be interest-based instead of being right-based. So you provide sufficient information to your clients on mediation being their alternative dispute resolution. We've talked about the advantages. That there are very few disadvantages in my mind. It's just you do not have a precedent. Sometimes parties are not serious in coming into a mediation. It's just a test. And sometimes in an agreement, if you see some construction agreements, mediation is actually a prerequisite to other form of dispute resolution methods. So sometimes people just want to get over and done with it. I will not, encourage that at all. Mediation should be the first front that for you to now try to mediate your problems. So very few disadvantages. We talk about the advantages already. So tell your clients that the consensual and voluntary process also means that you can terminate it at any time. Tell your clients that, because sometimes clients don't want to be pushed. So you tell them anytime you're not comfortable in a mediation, you can terminate this. Although again, I will not encourage this. You also you build your client, tell them move away from positional bargaining into collaborative negotiation, assuring that the focus of the parties now rests on mutual acceptable outcome rather than a win-lose outcome. And in mediation, the client can always have their say because it's them talking, not the lawyers. They can communicate directly what they want. So they do have their say at the end of the day. And in mediation, tell your clients that it allows parties to tailor a deal to specific needs of the parties in a far more bespoke way. Next slide, please. Briefly, there are just 3 types of mediation. What I've been talking about is facilitative mediation, where the mediator is just a facilitator. The court annexed or the court mandated mediation is evaluative because the judge actually evaluate your matters, and transformative is just in a way you empower the parties to transform themselves. Next slide, please. So what should mediators know about mediation? How do you start? How do you start this process? You prepare your client, you tell your client of the process. You inform, they should be well informed. Lawyers themselves should prepare it like any other matter, like you're going to a hearing. It is, sometimes people take this easy approach. You say that, oh, it's very informal, I don't have to prepare. No, lawyers, this is where you are wanted. You do your job as you do in any hearing, any trial. And you talk to your opposing counsel, you check and try to convince your opposing counsel if their client is willing to mediate. That's the best. I do that most of the time in my firm, that whenever we have a matter coming to us, we actually ask our clients first, would you want us to help you mediate? Some clients are, happy that we brought this up, and some clients are like, you mean you don't have faith in my matter? So it depends again, which clients you're talking to. But now, because cost being the main factor for people in bringing up or taking up an action, this could be the way. So talk to your opposing counsel, convince them to let's try, get clients to mediate. Then choosing a mediator. Do you want to choose a mediator who has the expert in that field, or do you want a mediator who is just a mediator who has mediated hundreds of cases and he has the experience of being a good mediator, but not necessarily knowing the subject matter? Sometimes it's good to have an expert mediator because you don't have to explain, especially in construction. You have all these terms and all that, EOT, LAD and all that. It might be very common to us, but to a layman, a lay mediator, he may not know. So you don't want to, consume time explaining to him in detail, especially when it's a structure of a building and all that. You want a mediator who has the expertise in that field. But there are times that you want a mediator expert, where a mediator with little or no relevant expertise in the subject matter who's able to acquire this technical knowledge through the parties themselves. So he's not prejudging. He's just getting the parties to tell him, and with him being unjudgmental, he's open and can listen better than, in his mind, like, when judges listen to mediation, they know the right and wrong, they know the law, they already are, prejudged sometimes in certain cases before actually helping clients to come up with their own solution. So you must know who you're choosing as your mediator. Next slide, please. And lawyers should know what the processes are. I will not go into detail, but briefly, how a mediation is conducted is that the parties get introduced. Either the mediator introduce the parties, and whoever is attending with them, their lawyers, the parties, maybe a person who's a translator there, or whoever. You should not have many people in the room. It should be mainly the parties themselves and their lawyers. And if you need a interpreter, he will be there. So introduce everyone. Mediator has his opening statement. He actually goes through the process of how he wants the mediation he's going to conduct. And he must always end with asking, do parties have authority to settle? Why do you ask that? Because no point coming to a mediation when you do not have the authority to settle. You said that I need to confirm with my boss. You don't do that. You want this to end in the mediation process. You must have authority to settle. Then the clients will have their own opening statement, the parties. Whoever can start, but the person bringing this mediation or the other person, whoever is comfortable, start the opening session. Each party will be given equal time for the opening statement. Then the arbitrator then identifies the issue and set an agenda. You can have a whiteboard and write down the agenda so that everybody can see. Then you go into the first joint session. The agenda you have written, you can ask, what they want to start off with first. Go through whatever the issues have been, the mediator has picked up. Ask them whether these are the issues that they are, they're wanting to resolve, or are there anything else? Maybe you did not pick up, so they may help you to, see the other issues. So they're not all the time, but there will come a time where parties may not be able to get headway. They might just be loggerheads. They do not want to move. They do not want to come up with a solution. They might still have anger with them. If you know that the mediation is not working out, this joint session is not working out, you break it up. You go to a private session. You take one party at a time. You have a private session with them, private caucus with them, always assuring them that whatever you have decided here or whatever you're discussing here will remain confidential unless he wants you to take that through in the joint session. So each party will have equal time in the private session. These are always my favorite because this is where you can test the party to come up with solution. You can put them in the other person's shoe. If you are in the other person's shoe, would you do that? How would you feel? You ask them their best alternative, their worst alternative. So this is the time for you to actually bring out the best from the parties in the private session. So once that is done, you are making headway. You go back to a second joint session where then parties, because they already have ventilated and they have ideas in their head, they will come together. You tell parties, okay, can you bring up what we spoke about? You can discuss it with the other parties. So in this time, you're hoping that things will get resolved, and once things are resolved, you conclude it by putting it down in writing, a settlement agreement, signing it, and you have a successful mediation. This is a rosy picture of a mediation, but not all mediation may end up the way it is. You can sometimes have 100% success, a win-win situation. You can have a situation where maybe out of 10 issues, 5 get resolved. That is good enough. The other 5, you may want to continue your court matters or where any other alternative resolution mechanism. So it is never, to me, it is never a failure. Actually, parties coming to mediate is already a good sign. So everybody, who's going to mediation, remember.
Samrith, to wrap up because I think we have overrun. Yeah.
Okay. So the objective is just to end the dispute amicably. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samrith. James and Buddy, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes. Okay. Well, you have heard from Kevin from a practitioner's point of view, and I think both of them are on common ground that mediation should be the preferred method of resolution, particularly during this COVID-19 crisis. You do not want to, really aggravate the level of dispute to another level, and it becomes acrimonious. I think these are the last things that people want to see. Now, the thing is that you have heard so much about mediation. We have heard so much about mediation, how successful they are, how useful they are if ones were to subscribe to it. But the thing is that so far, as we can see, it has never really taken off. But if it's so good, right? How come it is not taken off? In at least in Malaysia. What is your view on this, James?
I totally agree with you, Wailun, that mediation has had its challenges, and I think from hearing the Kevin and Samrith, there are three main stumbling blocks, if you like. The first is that in Malaysia, it's purely a voluntary process, and as you know, the mindset in Malaysia, if there's no whip, there's no will. So I think that is a huge stumbling block. Secondly is the mindset of both professionals who are in the ADR industry and litigants. I totally agree that there needs to be a huge effort to change the mindset among lawyers and litigants before we will see any improvement in the numbers of successful mediations or in the increase in successful mediations. And the third, and I feel that this is also a stumbling block, but this is probably the easiest stumbling block in which we can move on, is that we don't have an effective platform for mediation. I mean, I'm aware the Bar Council has got their own thing and the AIAC has got their own thing, but I think the stakeholders need to come together and have one platform with a whip. Without that whip, I don't think, unfortunately, mediation would be as successful as many people would like. And in this regard, I would like to pass on the baton to Buddy to speak on how mediation has become so successful in Australia, or especially in his jurisdiction of Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Just very quickly. So following from what James has said, in Victoria, mediation is a compulsory step. The moment a matter goes to court, during the first case management, mediation is part of the orders by the court. By which date do you have to appoint a mediator? By which date do you have to mediate the matter before the matter can then proceed to go on to trial? And speaking of the whip, which James has mentioned, the reason why the mediation regime works here is because parties in litigation and their lawyers owe a duty, a paramount duty to the courts here in Victoria. And these are codified in the Civil Procedure Act. So parties can't say that we don't want to mediate just because for the sake of not mediating. Parties owe a duty to the court, not only lawyers as officers of the court, but the disputants, the litigants themselves. That's the reason why mediation works in Victoria. And just as a statistic, the Mediation Association of Australia has stated that 85% of matters actually settles at mediation. That's a very high rate of success. And if parties were to be, say, recalcitrant and not want to follow the court orders, parties can be referred to the court. And courts do actually take not punitive actions, but do punish parties for their failure to uphold their obligation to the court, the paramount duty to the court. And even the mediation process itself, mediators are very important. In this jurisdiction, at the very least, we have barristers we have mediators who are barristers, ex-judges, senior solicitors, and these are people who are experienced in the courtroom scenario, and they know if your matter were to go to court, these are your witnesses, these are your strengths. So it's very important for a mediator during the caucus session to actually play the devil's advocate. Sometimes as lawyers, we play devil's advocates to our client. It doesn't quite work. As opposed to coming from a independent mediator whom both parties have agreed to appoint with cost, and they're paying the mediators fees as well. In Victoria and in New South Wales, mediators will have to be paid by the parties. So there's another incentive for parties to want to resolve the matter because they are paying for the mediators. It's not free, and they have to pay for venue fee, mediation venue fee as well. So all these costs would then become an incentive to the parties to actually want to arrive at a settlement. And then if we come to the point where we say, okay, if parties settle, how do we ensure that the settlement agreement is enforced? Now in Victoria, what we normally do is, as part of the settlement agreement, we actually stipulate that if say party A fails to pay party B, party A will be deemed to agree that whatever is owed will be a judgment that can be entered against him or her, and they can't challenge this in court. With this kind of clause in the settlement agreement, it gives certainty. At least we know that once parties have agreed, and bear in mind, as somebody said, both parties agreed to the conclusion, to the solution. Or with the fact that if one of the parties then decide not to follow through it makes a mockery of the mediation process for the other party to then say, oh, screw it, we're just going to go down litigation, or I'm going to appeal against it. It makes a mockery of the process. But if you have a default clause that says if you default, it will be taken as a judgment against you, I think, and it has worked in Victoria. So it gives certainty and peace of mind to the parties, knowing that at the end of the mediation session, whatever agreement has been arrived at, it will be carried out. The only times when parties can appeal, I suppose, or challenge the settlement agreement is, they could say that they have not given their solicitors authority to come to the conclusion of the settlement agreement, but that's another story. But at least we know that there'll be some form of safeguarding scenario whereby you can make sure that the settlement agreement can be carried out. So this is my experience in Victoria as to how mediation, which has been infused in the litigation process, and parties will actually follow through with the mediation process, and how in the enforcement of it can be seen to be carried through without any worries that any party would be in breach of the settlement agreement.
Thank you, Buddy, to share your experience in Victoria. Now, it seems that the success of a mediation is dependent on how much force that the system put on the parties. It seems that you need to force the parties to the mediation process in order for them to realize how good a mediation is or will be. Now, Hongkit, do you have any questions for the audience, for the speakers?
Yeah, actually, I have just one question. Being the only non-lawyer here, I have a layman question to James, maybe. James, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, James. Why should a lawyer promote or even encourage mediation while settling a case means less legal fee? Isn't it more sensible to drag the matter as long as possible to earn a bigger fee?
Well, I think, if a lawyer thinks like that, then, it's a very sorry lawyer, if you ask me. I give you an example from my and Buddy's own experience. Just before Buddy left back to Victoria, we were working on a case together. It was a construction matter, a very highly technical construction matter. And after months of correspondence and positions being exchanged between parties, we were obviously working with the client as we knew we were going down the road of litigation. And the claimant then instituted adjudication. We then spoke to the client. It's a big client, it's a multinational. And we told them, look, it's going to cost them a lot of money. It's going to cost them a lot of time. A lot of people from their organization will have to get involved with the lawyers. They will need experts, and ultimately the working team advised the board members that mediation would be the best way to move this dispute forward. And I'm glad to say that that's what we did. And as soon as we proposed mediation to the other party, who's also a very well-known litigation firm, their clients jumped on it. So, and that's what I mean when I first started my my presentation. The mindset on it has to change. It cannot be just looking at litigation as purely, dollars and cents. The mindset has to change. And how that mindset has to change, I have no answer for that. And I think it can only change with the whip.
Yes.
Thank you, James. What about you, Buddy? What's your take on that from the perspective of an Australian lawyer?
I note one of the questions by one of the audience is that it will affect the livelihood of lawyers. To be honest with you, when I was practicing in Malaysia, of course, we will never think of mediation. That would be the last resort. It's always heading towards litigation. But when I was practicing here, as I am now, because it has been infused as part and parcel of the litigation process, we've never viewed it as a process which will stymie us going forward earning more fee. When we go into mediation, we actually go with a view hoping that you settle. And if you settle matters with the clients, especially in a win-win situation, as what Samrith has said, and in some mediations, the mediators are so progressive where they say, lawyers, I do not want to hear from you. I actually want to hear from your clients. It actually empowers the clients, the litigants themselves, to put forth their position. And you'll be surprised how powerful that session would be, knowing that, you know, whatever things they say, of course, it's without prejudice, and they can speak so freely. It's such an organic process whereby the sort of results that can be achieved in a win-win situation, you'll never see it if you go down the path of litigation or arbitration. So just like what James said, lawyers, yes, we do want to earn our fee. Yes, we do have families to feed, but we shouldn't view it as, oh, we're just going to go through it as just another process, you know, just because if it settles, it means that's the end of our job. But if we have satisfied clients whom we can bring them to a mediation process and they achieve a win-win situation, win-win solution, satisfied clients will definitely come back to us. And I think that is definitely a win for lawyers and not to be viewed as a downside. And just if I can just end with this, mediation should not be seen as an inferior process. In fact, it is the converse. It should be seen as a superior process. Why? Because the litigants themselves are the drivers of that process. They get to pick the mediator. They get to speak at the mediation with some of the more progressive mediators, and they are the masters of whatever solution and settlement that will be arrived at the end of the day. I think that's a very strong and persuasive view of mediation that has to be put to clients. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. You know, it looks like after hearing all of you, in order for mediation to take off, there must first be a very good, what is called that, the mediation legislative system to give powers to judges, you know, and the whip to punish those who are not cooperative enough. And secondly, we also need some persuasion by believers in mediation as a process to move forward or to resolve disputes. Now, changing the mindsets is actually part and parcel of that process. But you know, Kevin, I just want to ask you, when parties are in disputes, they tend to be suspicious of each other. And how, in your experience, have you been successful in clearing that suspicion and get both parties together and go through the mediation process in a very successful manner?
Well, from my experience, I think the answer, I think the answer was exactly what Buddy had said. You empower the parties or the litigants. A lot of the reason for the suspicion is because you have the gatekeepers who are the lawyers. So parties tend to not want to trust the other party because they think that either my lawyer or the other party's lawyer are not telling them what they would like to hear or they should hear, or perhaps even the truth. So I think one very quick way of getting past the trust barrier is to put the parties into a room. And the best way of doing so is through mediation. And I don't think there's any other procedure other than mediation that does that as quickly and as fairly as mediation. You're looking at your other party directly in the eye and saying, look, this is what you did to me. I think you should compensate me X amount, and the other party can say, yes, but I don't think it's as bad as you seem to think it is, and I should only pay you Y amount, without the lawyers in the room whispering at one party or the other into their ears, and they only have one party that they need to answer to, and that is to a mediator that they trust. So at least that's my thinking. So I fully agree with Buddy, what Buddy had mentioned, and that is you really empower the parties, and it helps with the trust element.
Now, thank you, Kevin. I have a last question for all of you today. It is this. You see, mediation has been there for many, many years, right? And we had arbitration as well. We heard so much about the ineffectiveness of our court system, and then the arbitration. And we still had mediation to be the method that the parties could resort to. But no, that was not the emphasis. We passed SIPA to be the interim resolution methods of resolution to deal with disputes. we did not have a stronger legislation to promote mediation, to force the parties to go for resolution of disputes through this method. But even in these times of COVID-19, like in Singapore, what they have done is not like forcing both parties to go for mediation to resolve the matters, but they have actually set up a special tribunal to adjudicate disputes arising during this period. And the government people would actually appoint those expertise to deal with those disputes and come up with an interim decision. Now, why all these things, when you're talking about resolving disputes, it doesn't seem to be that mediation is at the forefront of things, or the first priority of that they should promote as a method to resolving disputes, even in these times of pandemic, the crisis that we are facing at the moment. What do you have to say about this? Samrith, do you have anything to say about this? Why is that so?
I personally think that there's just lack of awareness. People out there do not know enough about mediation, and they think that mediation is just a small by-the-by process. They do not know the power that mediation have, how you can resolve. I echo what everybody said. Once you tell the clients, once the clients are in the mediation room, it is just different. It's magical actually, because they can see face to face. What the industry doesn't know is that they do not know enough about this process. So perhaps it is time now to cause awareness. This has to be the forefront. I really don't know why he has not come, because maybe it's not, our legislation is not mandatory. There's no, mandated. It is always on voluntary basis. Although I do again prescribe to mediation being voluntary, but sometimes you need a push, maybe how the Australian system is. That's all. Thanks.
How about James? What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I totally agree with the views expressed by by the other three speakers, and I would like to perhaps touch upon what Buddy also said. We need to give litigants some sort of a platform which they can go to insofar as mediation is concerned, and perhaps if we start inviting very senior members of the bar and retired judges to take the bull by the horns, and they themselves start acting as mediators, then there might be some sort of positive which litigants can take away and say, look, we've got a very experienced person up there, we are empowered, why don't we take our dispute to them with very little interference from the lawyers. And from the comments I read, there seems to be a lot of adverse comments against lawyers being the hindrance towards mediation. And to a certain extent, I Kevin is smiling. And to a certain extent, I totally agree with that. Clients should be told that, you should be empowered, and we give you a platform of all these senior lawyers and ex-judges. Use them. Okay, sorry. Yeah, that's it from me.
All right. Okay. Kevin, what have you got to say about this?
I think I agree with James. The first thing I think that we need to do really is create a whip. No whip, no will. I think that was excellent, James. And perhaps the judiciary should think of implementing, or rather making mediation compulsory, at least at the lower courts now, immediately. Magistrates courts, all magistrate court matters and sessions court matters must go through some form of mediation before it goes to next stage. If we start there, then I think there would be greater reason, impetus for us to bring mediation into the mainstream. If we don't start somewhere, it's never going to take off. And it's always going to be a question of, or rather what Buddy said, mediation will always be seen as an inferior method and not necessarily the method that everyone should adopt or look to right at the start.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Now, Buddy, it looks like all three speakers are on common ground, agreeable with your view. It looks like you have you are living in a state where mediation is definitely more successful than Malaysia. And what would be your advice, your last piece of advice to us in Malaysia for mediation to have a bright future?
Okay, I think the one thing that we have to reflect is this: as dispute lawyers, our aim is to resolve disputes. Yes, we've been trained in unis, as a civil system, litigation is the only way, but we've got all these ADR methods now, especially in mediation. Client empowerment is one of the key points. The other thing that we've not touched upon is, if mediation fails, is there an upshot to it? To me, there is. If mediation fails, parties go back to their own cave and they can think about all the strategy going forward litigation. But issues would have been fleshed out even more, as opposed to just exchanging pleadings. You would know each other's case strengths and weaknesses even better. And this actually can promote further negotiations down the line with a view to obviate or to avoid litigation. And that has been, in my experience, whereby it doesn't mean that if mediation fails, that's it, that's the end of it. No, we actually explore with the clients, and sometimes clients will ask us, is there any way can we go back to them and say, look, is there a way to resolve this? And there is. So the upshot to a failed mediation is that negotiations need not stop at mediation. It can still continue with the hindsight and with the knowledge of all the strengths and weaknesses and all the issues that's been fleshed out during mediation. Thank you.
Thanks to all our special guests today, and I'm going to pass the mic back to Hongkit to close the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wailun. Thanks to all our 4 guests today for spending time with us, sharing their thoughts and experience. Also, big thanks to the audience who stay with us. We hope you enjoy and have a better understanding of the use of mediation. Thanks for tuning in. If you like our series and miss any of our previous sections, don't worry. Check out our YouTube channel and please subscribe to receive an update. As you can see on the screen, there are 2 more sections remaining, and tomorrow we will have our final guest for this 30-day and everyday L2 construction series. We are honored and excited to have Professor Dato Sundaraju as our final guest, and like many of you, we are looking forward to having conversation with him tomorrow. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Stay positive and take care. See you again tomorrow morning. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you. All right.
Bye, James, Samrith, Buddy, and Kelvin. And
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so
It was a
much.
pleasure.